In 2008, a group of engineers delivered a secret report predicting, with mathematical precision, exactly how the Fukushima nuclear plant would be destroyed. They predicted the height of the wave. They knew which generators would fail. They knew the core would melt. And at the end of the meeting, the executives did absolutely nothing, because fixing it was expensive. What happened 3 years later wasn't a natural disaster. It was the consequence of a signature on the wrong piece of paper. March 11th, 2011. The Earth moved for 6 minutes. Cities went dark. But inside Fukushima, something didn't fail. Everything worked, cooling engaged, backup generators online. On paper, the disaster never happened. 41 minutes later, it arrived, exactly where the numbers said it would. Japan doesn't build things the way other countries build things. It builds them like it knows something the rest of the world doesn't. Because for a very long time, it did. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station, operational since 1971, 6 reactors, 4,700 megawatts, enough electricity to power a city the size of Los Angeles. The engineers who designed it didn't just account for earthquakes, they expected them. They modeled them, they calculated for them, they built against them. Japan sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire. Everyone knew that. Seismic engineering wasn't a precaution, it was a philosophy. By the 2000s, Fukushima Daiichi wasn't just a power plant, it was a symbol of what Japanese industry could achieve, of public confidence. 40 years of safe operation, no critical incidents, no public scares, just clean, reliable, invisible power. The kind of infrastructure you stop thinking about. The kind of infrastructure people trust, the way they trust the floor beneath their feet. And then, 2008. A group of engineers inside TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, the utility that operated Fukushima, were handed a routine assignment. Model the worst-case scenario, run the simulation. Someone asked the wrong question. The engineers were called the Civil Design Group. Not a dramatic name, not a famous team, just the people who ran the numbers. The task was standard: update the probabilistic tsunami hazard assessment for the Fukushima site. Incorporate newer data, better historical records, more refined wave models. Routine. They began with the Jogan earthquake, 869 AD, a megathrust event off the Tohoku coast, magnitude estimated between 8.4 and 9.0, ancient, pre-modern, almost mythological. But the geological evidence wasn't mythological. Sediment layers, sand deposits, inundation markers buried 3 kilometers inland. The data was old, the physics wasn't. The engineers loaded the wave models, they ran the parameters, they input the seafloor topography, the offshore depth profile, the shoreline geometry, the precise layout of the Fukushima site. And they watched the simulation run. The wave came ashore at approximately 14 meters. That number mattered. The seawall at Fukushima Daiichi was designed for 5.7 meters. They ran it again, same result. They checked the backup generators, the generators that kept the cooling systems alive in the event of a power failure. Located on the basement floor of the turbine buildings, below the projected flood line. The simulation was clear. A wave of sufficient height would flood the generators. Without the generators, cooling fails. Without cooling, fuel rods heat beyond control. Without control, they wrote the number down, 14. And they kept running the model. The simulation didn't predict a disaster. It calculated a certainty. Given the right earthquake, given the right distance, given the geometry of the ocean floor and the exposed position of the facility, the system would fail. Not might, would. The report was completed in June 2008. The engineers submitted it. and waited.
The ocean follows physics. People usually don't.
The report existed. That's the part that matters. It wasn't a rumor. It wasn't speculation. It wasn't an outsider warning that could be dismissed as alarmist. It was an internal document, produced by TEPCO's own engineers, using TEPCO's own models, submitted through TEPCO's own channels. 12 pages, the kind of document that gets printed on standard white paper, that gets stapled in the corner, that gets placed on someone's desk. It outlined 3 scenarios. 1. The current seawall holds. Consequence: none. 2. A moderate tsunami exceeds the seawall. Consequence: partial flooding. Manageable. 3. A large-scale Jogan-class event. Consequence: total flooding of generator basement. Total loss of cooling function. Core meltdown. 3 recommendations were attached. Raise the seawall. Relocate the emergency generators to higher ground. Waterproof the critical electrical connections. Each recommendation came with a cost estimate, not a rough figure, a line item breakdown. The engineers had done the full work, not just the warning, the solution. The document was circulated internally, read by senior engineers, reviewed by management, stamped, filed. This is the part where, if this were a different story, the executives would nod solemnly, approve the budget, and the generators would be moved by 2010. But this is not a different story. The meetings were not dramatic. No one slammed a table. No one resigned in protest. No one called a lawyer. They were boardroom meetings, standard agenda, coffee, projector slides. The question wasn't really whether the simulation was accurate. No one in the room disputed the numbers. The question was what the numbers meant for the business. A 14-meter seawall was expensive. Relocating generators was disruptive, required permits, required engineering reviews, required downtime. And for what? A once-in-a-millennium event. The language in the meeting minutes changed, not the numbers. The numbers stayed exactly the same, but the language changed. Urgent action required became further study recommended. Immediate implementation became phased review. Potential system failure became manageable risk under current protocols. The same 14-meter wave, the same flooded basement, the same dead generators, described now as a low-probability scenario requiring additional assessment before any capital expenditure could be authorized. The report was not buried, it was not shredded, it was not hidden from regulators. It was softened, and then it was set aside. The engineers who wrote it were still employed. They still showed up to work every morning. They still knew what the simulation said. If you had those numbers in your hands, if you had run that model yourself, if you had seen the wave height and checked the elevation of those generators, what would you have done? Not as a regulator, not as a journalist, not as someone with nothing to lose. As someone inside the building, with a mortgage, with a career, with a manager who had already heard the number and decided it was acceptable. What would you have done?
Predictions don't disappear. They wait.
2008 became 2009. Operations continued. Morning shifts, evening shifts, reactor checks, routine maintenance, annual inspections, satisfactory ratings. 2009 became 2010. The report sat in a file. More meetings, more assessments, more language about phased implementation. No generators were moved. No seawall was raised. No waterproofing was completed. The facility ran clean. The public saw clean. The press releases said clean. Inside, a small number of engineers still knew what the simulation had shown. They came to work anyway. 2010 became 2011. January, February, normal operations, quarterly reports, stable power output, no incidents. March arrived. Cold, ordinary, unremarkable. Workers on the early shift. Lunches packed. Coffee cooling on desks. The reactors running as they had for 40 years. March 11th, 2:46 p.m. The Earth moved. The earthquake lasted nearly 6 minutes, the largest to ever strike Japan. Magnitude 9.0. The ground moved. The buildings shook. The emergency systems engaged. The reactors shut down automatically, exactly as designed. The backup generators activated, exactly as designed. For 41 minutes, everything worked. For 41 minutes, the disaster hadn't happened. At 3:27 p.m., the first wave arrived. 11 meters above the seawall baseline, just as predicted. The seawall was overtopped, just as predicted. Water entered the turbine building basements, just as predicted. The generators flooded. The generators died, just as predicted. Cooling power failed. Reactor temperatures began to rise, just as predicted. By the evening of March 11th, Fukushima Daiichi Unit 1 was in station blackout. No power, no cooling, no control. In the days that followed, hydrogen explosions, fuel rod exposure, partial meltdowns, radiation releases, the evacuation of 154,000 people, the contamination of land that remains uninhabitable today. Every step, every moment, every number had been written down in a 12-page report submitted to management in June of 2008. The ocean didn't surprise anyone. Not the engineers who built the model, not the executives who read the numbers, just everyone else. It wasn't the earthquake. Japan had survived earthquakes larger. The plants were designed for exactly this. The reactors shut down perfectly. The earthquake did not cause the disaster. It wasn't the ocean. Tsunamis had been modeled before, had been survived before, were understood before. A wave doesn't improvise. It only does what physics tells it to do. The ocean did not cause the disaster. It wasn't bad luck. Bad luck is the thing that falls outside the simulation. This fell exactly inside the simulation. This was the simulation. The Fukushima Daiichi disaster was declared a man-made catastrophe by Japan's National Diet in 2012. Not a natural disaster. Man-made. The generators were in the basement. The seawall was 5.7 meters tall. The report said 14. The generators were never moved. The seawall was never raised. The waterproofing was never completed. Not because the engineers were wrong, not because the technology failed, not because anyone was surprised, because a decision was made, in a boardroom, with coffee going cold, that the numbers were acceptable, that the risk was manageable, that the cost of prevention was greater than the cost of the alternative. 154,000 people were evacuated. The alternative had a price too. The cost was never unknown, only postponed.
The numbers were never wrong, only the decision.